I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Amy Fong is a partner leading Everest Group sourcing and vendor management practice. In this role, she advises enterprises on maximizing value from strategic provider relationships in global services categories. Khushbu Hanjura is a senior analyst working in the sourcing and vendor management team. She leads the research related to supplier risk technologies and sustainability. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Amy.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining today. We are happy to have you here as we discuss risk management tools and the power of advanced technologies to mitigate supplier risk. We're going to talk through a few different topics today, and I want to start with a supplier risk overview, just talking about some of the different categories of supply risk or types of risk, as well as the life cycle and value chain. And then we'll get into a bit more detail on the challenges and priorities, as well as how technology is helping and some of the forward-looking strategies. So let's talk now about how Everest Group defines supplier risk, and want to make sure that we're all on the same page with this. There's a lot of different types of risk in the supply base, in the supplier at the supplier level, and broadly across the organization. So we're focused on supply risk here today, mainly financial risk, sustainability, fourth party risk, reputational risk, for instance, media events or brand devaluation or things that can affect your brand in the market, and supplier performance, or rather lack of supplier performance, supplier failures, cybersecurity, which has probably gotten the most headlines of in recent years, and is something that everyone is very much aware of, both your internal supplier cyber security as well as that of your suppliers. Regulatory and compliance, geopolitical, so thinking about the geographic impacts and the political impacts based on where your supply base is or your supply chain. And then finally, organizational change. So we think about this, and Everest Group especially, where we work a lot with large strategic categories like outsourced services, BPO, or IT services. Organizational change can have a lot of impact on that. Changes in leadership at your suppliers, attrition, talent challenges, all of that can be significant risk to the performance of your business. So as we jump into this and we start to talk about more of the specific challenges and the specific ways to address them, I want to understand, for everyone who's on the call right now, how effectively do you feel like your current processes and tools around supplier risk are meeting your business's needs? We kept these fairly simple. Are they very effective? Are they mostly effective, but we can always do better? Are they inconsistent, meaning they're working well sometimes, or they're working well in certain segments, certain categories, or do you just out and out feel that they're not effective at all? So please answer the poll. It's a quick, easy one, and I'm going to give it another few seconds for people to fill in here, and then we'll take a look at the data. Interesting. It's always this is always interesting to me to see who we have on the call today, and get a feel for where most companies are. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna close it in just a couple seconds. 3, 2, there we go. All right, sharing the results now. And unfortunately, most of you said inconsistent. I can't say I'm particularly surprised about that. That about 70% said inconsistent, and about 30% said mostly effective with room for improvement. Congratulations to those 30%. That's actually a big accomplishment, because there's a lot we're going to talk about, and there's a lot to be done in the area of supply risk. Kushbu, any thoughts on that? Is that about what you would expect?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I mean, pretty interesting results over here, right? And this goes back to my conversations with clients, and we also keep hearing this a lot in conversations in terms of how inconsistent it is for the current tools and technologies to meet the risk expectations clearly. So we hope that in the coming slides we are able to give you some information which will help you essentially make that decision in a better way, that okay, how best you can approach this process, right?
Yeah, thanks. Great point. And let's jump into this. I will say, inconsistent and ineffective are not necessarily
Hmm.
parallel, right? So you don't need to have the same risk thresholds and level of control over every supplier and every category in your business. But what you do need is to be effective is to know where those soft spots might be and those higher risks are, so that you can address them. And hopefully that'll come out a bit as we talk about this. So let's look at the life cycle of supplier risk management as we're going into this, so that we all kind of understand the steps that we're talking about here. It's really an end-to-end, some people would say cradle to grave process, starting with identifying suppliers and doing due diligence as you're looking to select suppliers, understanding, who of the potential supply base, which ones are compatible in terms of background stat checks, financial reviews, really the basic fundamentals that you need to include suppliers. There's typically a risk assessment when you're onboarding a supplier, or when you're selecting a supplier, to identify any potential risks that might come up in the engagement. This can go on. The risk assessment can be an ongoing thing, as we'll touch in a minute, but certain standards that you want to ensure you're adhering to. Then contracting as well as onboarding. You often will have to implement certain security measures and establish specific communication channels, as well as holding, in your contract, holding suppliers to meet certain standards that are non-negotiable to you. Risk mitigation kind of goes hand in hand with continuous monitoring, right? And sorry, I kind of jumped over that 3, 4, but to me, they're kind of interchangeable. All these things are happening in parallel, where you're looking at the potential risks and determining a score, and then evaluating and creating, a plan based on that score. Continuous monitoring happens as you continuously assess those risks and continue to keep those mitigation plans ready to go in case something should happen. Um, and then supplier offboarding when you're ending the relationship, or renewing the relationship, right? And I actually, in my experience, offboarding is often a step that's kind of missed, especially when we look at cybersecurity risks that, you've ended or decided to ramp down a relationship with a supplier, making sure that everything is completely shut off, and that you've eliminated or addressed any potential risks with them. That's an important step that sometimes we're so focused on the next supplier that we don't put enough time into it. Um, when we think about criticality, I kind of mentioned that different suppliers might have, or different categories might have different levels of risk. When you think about the key factors that impact the criticality of the risk management program, there's a variety of things to think about here. So think about the number of suppliers across your program, or across, the various categories you're looking at. You have a smaller supply base. Companies with a larger supply base will need a more strategic, centralized approach. The size of your suppliers. So the smaller your suppliers, the more likely, you might want to look closer at them. I don't like to think that any provider is too big to fail, but you certainly have a little bit more stability with larger companies, larger partners. That also may mean that if you're trying to increase your supplier diversity, you're offering extra supports with small suppliers. So, think about those different thresholds that you may need to keep an eye on and support your smaller suppliers, as well as monitoring and mitigating the risks. Looking at the nature of suppliers, the type of services that they're supporting. Do they have are they handling sensitive data? Are they involved in regulatory requirements? What are the core business operations? Geographic challenges. So when we talk about geopolitical risk, there's a lot of differences in different geographies where you may be operating or where your suppliers may be operating. It's really important to be aware of the impact of those and how those risks vary. And then thinking about the regulatory environment. So both the regulatory environment your organization operates in, the industry that you're in. If you're a bank, you're going to have specific regulatory risks. If you're a pharma company, different regulatory risks. Obviously, most companies are pretty aware of those, but also thinking about the operating geographies of your suppliers and specific services or goods they may be providing and how those fit in. So all of these kind of come together to impact both the needs for your own supplier program, your risk program, as well as the needs across different categories that you need to be protecting for. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Khushbu. She's going to talk about the top risk management categories and challenges in managing supplier risk.
Thanks a lot, Amy. Hi, everyone. So just want to, take you through a quick survey that we, did with the senior sourcing stakeholders, because we wanted to understand from them as well, right? Like what does the risk management look like for them? And we asked them a couple of interesting questions. So first one being, of course, we wanted to understand that what are the primary risk factors that they consider in their supplier assessments. And the results are right in front of you. The top categories that we have over here that I would like to essentially call out are financial risk, of course. Assessing a supplier's financial stability is vital to reduce bankruptcy risks and maintain operational reliability. And next, of course, is the regulatory and compliance, which is again essential for mitigating any legal risks and ensuring operational continuity. And by monitoring regulatory changes, we can proactively address any potential challenges, preventing disruptions in our operations. Third, and of course, very interestingly, cybersecurity. Right, in today's digital landscape, assessing cybersecurity measures and evaluating IT resilience is extremely crucial. And these steps also help in reduce cyber threats and enhance the overall cybersecurity readiness, protecting the operations from potential breaches. Then comes supplier performance. Continuous evaluation of supply performance allows the sourcing managers to drive timely corrective actions and improve operational efficiency. Then, since our world is so dynamic, geopolitical factors essentially are again important in anticipating the situations and how those risks can essentially be minimized in our supply portfolio. Then what we also wanted to understand, in terms of the reputation management, what is that also a risk factor which is essentially included in supplier assessments? And right now it's not very popular, but we do see this essentially coming across as extremely important, because media coverage and brand perception is key to anticipating reputation risks. So enterprises are safeguarding their brand value through proactive management. So, and just maintaining that resilience against negative events. And then, of course, we have sustainability and ESG considerations. Um, um, I am, surprised to see this, not being so popular in supplier assessments. But of course, it's, in terms of the conversations that we have had, scope 3 assessments of, carbon footprints essentially aid in compliance and help to shape sustainability strategies. That is something that we have heard in conversations. Then, of course, organizational change in terms of, any leadership transitions or talent losses is also something which essentially um, helps to understand disruptions and maintain operational stability. And of course, the fourth party risks, it's crucial to identify all your downstream suppliers to, maintain that supply chain resilience. So I wanted to, understand from our audience as well. And, we want this to be, a two-way conversation. We wanted to understand from you as well, like how are these results looking like for you? Do you agree in terms of, the risk factors which are coming out at the top? Is there any, risk factor which is, coming down below, which you would, put probably at the top of the list in terms of the intensity?
Yeah, and we can take responses. The Q&A is open, so if you want to ask questions or make comments, use the Q&A. And we are keeping an eye on that. We will address questions probably at the end. If it's something clarifying or related to the current slide we're on, might bring that up, but otherwise I see one on there already that I can talk about, but we'll wait till we get to the end on that because I think we might address it. One comment, Khushbu, on that slide, I do think it's interesting how sustainability is further down the list. And I've gone back and forth on this, and I'm going to say in the old days, but I don't know, but anything pre-COVID is old days, right? I always kind of thought of sustainability as completely separate than risk. ESG or diversity or anything, environmental is sort of a separate yardstick. I know that all of the tech providers we've talked to tend to put, and a lot of the companies we talk to tend to put sustainability into risk as a type of risk versus like viewing it as a plus, a value add. So I wonder if that influences this results. I just wanted to call that out. I do think the industry as a whole is thinking of sustainability in the bucket with risk, but prior to some of the providers out there that are providing risk data right now that we've seen, I think I would have said that's like we're watching risks and we're monitoring to be more sustainable, and they're two separate, separate things, right?
Yes, Amy, makes sense. Okay, moving on.
Yeah. And there is a comment there. Thank you for that. Regulatory compliance is not optional, such as sanctions screening. Yeah, totally agree. So some of the risks, depending on where you are, sustainability might be optional. It might not be, and when it is, right? So there's still a lot of potential regulations there. Different industries have different requirements, but I think it's a good point that there are some things on here that are not optional, like regulatory, and there are some that are not, that are optional, sorry, or that are important to have, but you could do them at different levels depending on your organization's priorities. So great point. That's why regulatory and compliance, I'm sure, is right at the top, because the last thing you want in a regulated industry is finding something at a supplier that risks your regulatory certification or whatever as applicable. Sorry, go ahead, Khushbu. Jump on.
No worries. All right. And also, while we are discussing, opportunities in this particular arena, it's also valuable to understand that what are the current challenges, right, in managing these initiatives that organizations are essentially facing. So we asked that question as well, and the most number of responses that we got was for the lack of structured supplier data, which we of course keep hearing a lot, that there is often a lot of struggle which is faced in terms of lack of structured data across suppliers, which essentially hampers effective assessment. Then, of course, also around addressing diverse risks, because there are so many multiple categories, and it can get complicated due to the need to address multiple types of risks, which we just discussed, right? And also, 46% of the organizations believe that rising frequency of cybersecurity threats also adds to those challenges on top, right? Because now, we need to ensure that there is continuous monitoring in place, and there are proactive measures which are being taken to safeguard on the supply portfolio. And of course, around limited tools for risk prediction, right? Lack of customization is also something that we usually, hear in conversations around risk prediction, which are, often lacking. There is still some gap in, effectively predicting and managing risks associated with different categories of suppliers. And also 43% think that excessive data analysis is needed with respect to different suppliers, and which directly relates to significant resources and time which is needed to go through the thorough analysis, and so on and so forth. Then, inconsistent risk management capabilities across units, synchronized risk management activities in terms of inefficient coordination, and lack of synchronization among stakeholders can also create those gaps and overlaps in risk management activities. And in the last, we have suboptimal mitigation focus, because there might be organizations who are not effectively prioritizing risk mitigation strategies, which can lead to potential vulnerabilities in the supply chain.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see that so low mitigation. I actually think most companies, in my experience, don't do a great job of mitigating risks. They're pretty good at identifying where the risks are, but having a backup plan or putting in place, strategies so that they can pivot on a dime if something does go wrong is a lot harder. So surprised only 14% found that to be a challenge. I feel like it's a thing that we don't admit we have a problem until we get to a bad situation. There is a comment here I wanted to call out about, surprised that fourth party risks aren't rated higher, particularly with all the InfoSec concerns and breaches we've seen in the last several years. I agree with that. I'm going to flip back one slide just for a second to look at that fourth party risks all the way at the bottom there. And, this is where some of these things I think might be blind spots for a lot of organizations. Yes, you have to worry about cybersecurity for your suppliers, but what about your suppliers? And a lot of those huge, big headlines we've seen in the last few years have been, second tier suppliers, or partners of your suppliers, or sometimes fourth party isn't even just your suppliers, it's, other network partners that you might be working with. So I think that's a good point there, that I'm a little bit surprised as well that that's so far down the line. And I know some organizations with really good TPRM programs have built that into their, have built a more robust process around fourth party risks.
Okay, moving on to the next section, wherein we will be talking about how technology essentially is becoming a game changer for supply risk management. Just wanted to call out that we have been talking to a lot of sourcing organizations, and at the same time we have been talking to a lot of providers as well, in terms to understand like what are the tools and what are the features that they are providing to their clients in terms of advanced capabilities, such as risk control towers, supply chain mapping, so on and so forth. Like what are those, some of those capabilities which are really standing out in their tool, right? So calling out some of those over here. First is data democratization. Of course, there is a lot of focus right now to give access to a wide variety of data to multiple users, just to make sure that there is a structured flow of information, and people are being held accountable for making decisions. And some of the advanced tools Resilink and risk methods essentially facilitate a lot of collaboration by enabling different teams to work together within their platform. This could also mean, different teams such as procurement, risk management, and sustainability team just can access and share the same data in real time, which allows for a more integrated approach to the whole risk management process. Secondly, talking about third-party integrations for validation and enrichment, which is, of course, very essential components of advanced supply risk management platforms. These integrations essentially help the quality, the accuracy, the depth of supply data by automatically pulling in external information from various trusted sources. And some of those providers we have listed down over here, like DNB, EcoVadis, Rapid Ratings. And also, supply chain mapping, right? Mapping a multi-tier, multi-party supply chain network is a complex but a crucial process for identifying those risks across the entire supply chain, from including the tier 2 and tier 3 and even lower tier suppliers. And this is a functionality which is which organizations get a lot of visibility through this particular capability, and they are able to see a full scope of their supplier portfolio, which enables them to proactively manage risks, not just from the tier 1 suppliers, but all the way down through the chain, right? Also, calling out highly flexible frameworks to manage risks at different nodes. So Aravo, which is a great supply risk management tool, also offers a third-party risk management platform and enables the organizations to track and manage risks across their supplier network. And the platform essentially supports no code configurations for risk assessments and provides customizable risk roll-up logic, which allows organizations to aggregate risks from individual suppliers to a broader supply chain network. Risk control, TAR, and mitigation workflows are typically, organizations that specialize in risk management and offer solutions to help businesses identify, assess, and monitor, and mitigate risks. And these providers, use advanced technologies such as automation, data analytics, and machine learning to manage residual risks very effectively. And lastly, risk managing risk intelligence from external and internal data sources, just to make sure that there is integration of risk intelligence tools throughout the S2P process, from supplier onboarding to payment, and ensuring continuous and seamless risk assessment. There are many tools which utilize automated alerts for real-time updates on emerging risks and leverage third-party data sources for comprehensive insights. So these are some of the advanced capabilities that we essentially see different risk management tools offering to their clients. Moving to the next part, of course, there is a lot of talks about Gen AI and sourcing and procurement. So, of course, we also had to talk about some of the crucial use cases that we see in supplier risk management, right? And just drilling those down further in this slide, talking about intake management and conversational reporting. There is a lot of focus on enhancing communication through AI-based conversational agents, which provide real-time suggestions, which help in improving efficiency in reporting and effective query resolution. Then we also have, Gen AI-driven enhancements to supply chain mapping and risk control. ServiceNow, exemplifies the use of Gen AI-driven enhancements in supply chain mapping and risk control. They have integrated AI into their platform, which has helped in, enhanced data integration and analysis. There are many tools, other tools as well, AI-driven risk, control tower workflows, which provide real-time monitoring and management of supply chain risks, which enables the users to proactively address vulnerabilities. Then, talking about Gen AI-driven due diligence and anomaly detection, there is, this functionality is also essentially picking up in tools that how they use anomaly detection algorithms to identify irregularities in control forms and reports, and which has helped in, timely risk mitigation. And also, helps in summarizing complex risk factors, making it easier to understand and act upon. One interesting use case that we also see is around news analysis and real-time impact prediction, right? So now there is a lot of focus also around analyzing vast amounts of news data in real time and extracting relevant information from press releases, from news articles, and from financial reports, and also doing a sentiment, analysis on that, right? So advanced AI algorithms are being used to assess the sentiment and the tone of news content, and providing a deeper understanding of how events like such, executive changes or corporate mergers are affecting the market and, the individual suppliers, of course. And also, there is a lot of focus around predictive analytics and how that can essentially lead to an enhanced risk management. We see functionalities being built across leveraging historical performance data and community insights to have updated risk profiles to better manage potential risks. And AI is being heavily used to identify those trends and patterns in across different categories to help in proactively managing the risk. And we also wanted to call out certain providers which are doing it pretty well, and there are a lot of heavy investments which are going on in the Gen AI department. Amy, anything that you would like to add over here?
No, that's great. I think you hit on all the key points on these. Let's jump into the next slide and just talk about an example here of a bank that we've worked with that had an out-of-date source to pay solution that included risk. And they upgraded that. It was fairly outdated. It was kind of part of a suite, and frequently needed a lot of exceptions. So not the most flexible of tools. Moving to a more configurable rules-based risk solution allowed them to standardize processes and automate more of those exceptions, unify a bunch of legacy systems that they had, and also put in better security and accessibility standards, and also helped with collaboration. And I think that's one of the key things to think about with the newer systems that are out there across any source to pay tech, is that collaboration across different parties in the organization is really a differentiator, and making these tools more user friendly can help with that. So some of the takeaways that we've seen from companies like this when they upgrade their systems and move to something more modern and more tailored to their specific needs is that it can really drive your operational excellence. You're standardizing processes, you're simplifying, you're driving operational excellence across the risk framework and your growth goals. Reliability is very important. If you're relying on legacy systems, you may not have the consistency that you need and the stability. Compliance and security, so that's come up several times now, right? And there's not just expecting your providers to be compliant or your suppliers to be compliant with regulatory. There's also data standards that we all need to maintain internally to meet whatever certifications or requirements that we have had. I know that as a supplier to some companies, obviously we're all of us are suppliers to someone, even if it's a consumer, and buyers to suppliers, right? We're all somewhere in that food chain. We struggle with this ourselves, like making sure that we have all the right security infosec requirements for every RFP we do, which is interesting because often they're a little out of date. This is my anecdote from our IT security person reviewing RFPs and going, well, we don't do that because it's outdated. There are certain techniques like changing your password every 6 months that, they would say use authentication, tools instead, right? Two-factor authentication has superseded that. So as these tech security requirements change, new technologies and new systems can enable that for you yourself internally in your organization as well. And then finally, there's just enhancing the whole process and being able to look at the technology overall and at being able to be more flexible. We'll talk about, we talked about sort of having flexibility across different types of suppliers, having a more cohesive process, linking collaboration between end users and suppliers more, and new technology can help quite a bit with that. So there's a lot of ways you can go down the path with new technology. We've looked at a lot of different tools, and over time, I've seen a lot of these tools kind of come in and out. What I've seen is that for most organizations, they need a variety of tools and technologies. There are some ways to kind of harmonize this and bring this together, but really got to think about what are your priorities. How many, like anything else, it's a portfolio, right? And anytime someone says, oh, we're going to unify the entire portfolio and have one system or one supplier for everything, there's always the question of what are the trade-offs and what are you giving up. So you may say we can have one supplier for all of risk management, but or one tool or one suite, but what are some of the trade-offs that you're accepting there? It's important to go in with that understanding. So we look at things like financial risk that, some of the specific tools here like D&B, Rapid Ratings, Moody's, they're really well known for financial risk. Some of these are better at getting global private companies compared to others. That's a big differentiator that I see. Depending on your supply chain, you may be able to work with something that's more US based, or you may need something more localized. Different suites as well as Tools help with organizational tracking, regulatory and compliance. Often you need something that's more industry specific to hit those compliance requirements, like Wolters Kluwer or Thomson Reuters or any of those listed here. Reputation, there's a few different solutions for fourth party risks as well. And then we look at geopolitical, and then finally sustainability, where EcoVadis is well known for that. Sustainalytics, that one's tricky to say, also offers some sustainability. So depending on what kind of risks you're prioritizing, protecting against, you might want to look at different risk rating platforms or best of breed providers on top of a suite. A lot of the suites have a lot of components of this, but if you have everything and if you are really optimized for every type of risk. So I say that with most kinds of technology, it's worth looking at, end to end, where the trade-offs are for more solutions versus, one solution. The cost of integrating those solutions has gone down quite a bit over time with technology. Next thing to think about is just the risk management challenges in these programs in terms of the highest challenges. But often what we see is things like supplier engagement. Anytime you're asking your suppliers to do something, to take on responsibility, it's one more ask. It's hard for me to influence my kids, people in my own organization to do things. So getting a supplier that's external to do one more thing and do it exactly the way you need it is difficult. I think the more, we were watching some demos, and I think the more that you can, the risk providers can automate the gathering of information or use Gen AI to extract it and maybe have suppliers validate it until it's well trained. But that is likely to get you more consistent results. Tech implementation and maintenance costs. So I did say that integration costs have gone down quite a bit as APIs have become pretty common across all these different software packages, but there's still a lot of upfront costs for software, for hardware, for training, updates, subscription-based software that's you're paying forever, right? So the cost model for the end-to-end can be a challenge for organizations, and developing mitigation tools. So again, I think that's really the soft spot that most companies have, that the mitigation planning components are not as strong, and that is just not the focus where people tend to put their time, even though they probably most should put a lot more time into it. There's some other things that came up when we asked about challenges. Multiple tools, obviously there's some challenges with that, right? You'd rather have one. Scaling as you grow or as your supply base grows, tailoring different algorithms to accurately assess the risk factors and not over bias against certain criteria that may be less of a priority. And then interestingly, lower priority for people, or lower challenge, I guess this isn't really priority, but lower challenge in terms of the data security. I do think that my hypothesis there is that most of the tools kind of click all the boxes you need from a data security standard, right? The tech companies understand what needs to happen there. And integration with pre-existing systems, again, as I said, with APIs, this is every system out there in the procure tech space, for the most part, are designed to work with other systems. Most of these tech providers know that you're not the only, they're not the one and only, so they make it easier. You have less of a challenge there than you might have a few years ago. Next thing that I would like to mention is just a offer that we always make when we're doing these webinars. Thank you for everyone for joining today. We have another section, but wanted to get this in before we get to that section. If you are interested in a briefing with our analysts, please reach out to us. There'll be There is a survey in the chat right now. We actually released a report before this on supplier relationship management, and happy to share that report as well as do a briefing on it for you. Looking at SRM technology, close to risk technology, adjacent, I would say, not quite the same thing. And we're also, if you click that link and put a note in there, always happy to do, or put a note in the chat, always happy to do a more detailed briefing on this topic on risk management tools as well. We will have a report coming out on this. So let's jump into our next poll, and then we will get to our kind of forward-looking strategies. Poll here is, which area of supplier risk management do you believe would benefit the most from advanced digital tools? And think about this in terms of your own organization. Which of the areas here in terms of risk management, the steps we've talked about, so assessment and monitoring, compliance management, performance evaluation, analytics and reporting, and mitigation planning. Which of these would you most, if you could put your money on one spot to invest and really upgrade your risk technologies, which would be the best bet? Okay, going to give it a little bit longer as we're still getting responses in here. Kushbu, what do you think it's going to be?
I think compliance. Oh, compliance is actually pretty low.
Oh, is it up? Let's see.
Yeah.
Share results. All right, we stopped the survey and sharing the results now. Yeah, so sorry. Interesting, compliance is wrong or low.
Yeah.
That's just 7%. And mitigation also low, despite my my continuous, harping that mitigation we need to get better at. I also think possibly, mitigation is not the most automatable thing. There's some, part of that is it requires human intervention, whereas some of the ones that came to the top here, like assessment and monitoring, we definitely can automate that and trust the tech. Same with data analytics and reporting, getting a dashboard that you can use to then drive mitigation planning or drive your compliance management. That can be key to take some of the noise out of things and be able to make better decisions. So good. Thank you everyone who responded. I know it's hard to pick one, and we probably could have said, pick all, and everyone would have picked most of these, but kind of prioritizing, where do you put your bet? It's interesting to see the assessment and monitoring and analytics and reporting. I think those are pretty common, use cases are pretty, embedded into most of the technology that we look at. All right, so let's jump into forward-looking strategies and talk just a bit about some of the things that we see as coming down the pipe, or as the biggest priorities for sourcing managers to think about when they're leveraging advanced technologies. I think the top one is enhancing supplier communication and collaboration. So think about how you work with suppliers on this. Invest in developing your suppliers where you can. Open communication, especially like, for instance, fourth party risk, right? You don't need to monitor suppliers on your own. You can ensure that your suppliers are monitoring their supply base and trust but verify where needed. So really collaborating on those kind of points. Think about where you can use advanced technologies. AI, blockchain, Internet of Things can help with things like predictive analysis and transparency. I think we don't talk about the blockchain enough, or the concept of it, and how the applications in supplier management and supply chain management can be really valuable. I know some of the providers we're talking to, the tech providers, do use that, and I think it's helpful to think about or look for in your solutions. Strengthen your multi-tier risk visibility, and then focus on tools with enhanced user experience and customization. think about how you can, make the stakeholder experience good on here. And so with that, we've got a few minutes left, and I want to open it up to Q&A. I do see one question here that was asked earlier, and I wanted to talk about it. It's creating supplier segmentation for SRM when you have a really large base of suppliers. So I'm going to answer this question with I think there's 3 dimensions of segmenting your suppliers. The traditional SRM, supplier relationship management, and I think you meant supplier relationship management, but I'll answer for all of these because I have a lot of thoughts. So supplier relationship management, typically stratifying at the sourcing level of like the supply base across the organization. You're usually looking at factors like how large are these suppliers? Are they supported by multiple business units? Are they, how reliant is our business on them, which is a risk factor? Are they supporting something where there's no backup? So there's some risk aspects, but there's also spend and impact on revenue and magnitude aspects that you're typically looking at, your pyramid. And that pyramid might determine the governance that you have for different types of suppliers. That is certainly important. I also think that there needs to be a couple of other overlays to that. So I think there's an overlay in certain categories where you need to have, in most categories where you need to have sort of a portfolio approach for that category. So what is the mix of suppliers? We see this a lot in outsourced services or IT services. We call it portfolio strategy. And it's not just, who are our strategic suppliers? It's things like, what is the mix of work we want across these? Do we want a champion challenger model? Do we want one primary and some specialists? Do we want a mix of 4 and we keep it evenly divided? There's a lot of different strategies you can have in certain categories that you need to look at there and decide from that what are our, who's most strategic. There's also categories where you just want a preferred supplier list and you're determining, here's the 5 suppliers that we're okay with people buying off of. And we always start with those and we only go to others when needed. The third thing that I think has to be an overlay for all of this is your risk, the information you have on risk. And I think any supplier across any of those tiers can be at risk, right? We can find that there is a financial risk with one of your top suppliers. You can find that the org changes are critical. There might be other suppliers that you monitor, they're not involved in any sensitive data, they're not particularly business critical, they're fairly stable and you don't need to monitor them as much, but that may determine your behavior as well, even if they're a fairly large supplier. So I really think of you need sort of 3 different lenses to look at supplier segmentation, and you act accordingly to that. So I know that's probably more complex than most sourcing people want. They just want to take their supply base and sort it by spend and manage it that way. But I don't think that that's the best way. I do see a question on the presentation. Yes, you will get the slides as well as the recording of this. We send that out within a day or two. It takes a day or two for the recording to come up to be ready with our team. Next question, is supplier risk management important for mid-size or smaller enterprises, and how different than for larger enterprises? Kishpi, do you want to comment on that, or do you want me to take that one?
No, I can take that up, Amy. Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, it's definitely crucial for mid-sized and smaller, enterprises as well. While the fundamentals are essentially similar across the businesses, but the approach and emphasis can really help in redirecting the decision making, right? So, for example, when it comes to the smaller enterprises, I think there is a lot of dependence on key suppliers. The resources are limited. Of course, the mid-size and small enterprises, they might also be more vulnerable to financial stability, right? So these are some of the factors which might also affect the decision making. And effective supplier risk management would help in, catering to all of these aspects, right? um, for what we see as a difference, right, in terms of larger enterprises and smaller enterprises, is that for larger organizations, there, we have dedicated teams. The tools that are being used are more sophisticated, which helps them, do the in-depth risk assessments. And for smaller and mid-sized, enterprises, of course, scale, is a challenge, right? So they often rely on more streamlined and manual processes for risk management, but at the same time, they are exploring, the different tools and, technologies which would essentially cater to the exact challenges that they essentially have.
I see a follow-up question here about would enterprises be able to license and leverage best of breed solutions, or will they seek pure solutions to address most requirements cradle to grave? Just, I know we're almost out of time. My quick answer to that is, the good thing about best of breed solutions is that they do typically come at a more accessible price point, and they tend to be, a little bit more flexible for smaller or mid-sized companies. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that, they are an option for a smaller to mid-sized enterprise. I think that they may, as a smaller organization, you may need fewer combination, and like Kushbu said, you might need not have as large of a supply base, not need to go as deep, but there's certainly tools out there for companies of every size. I want to wrap up. One thing that I don't have on the slides here, but I want to throw out there, I'd be remiss not to, because I'm in the middle of planning, is our Everest Group Engage conference is coming up. It's September 30th to October 2nd, so we're coming up pretty soon in Dallas. If you are able to make it to Dallas, we would love to have you. It's really focused on sourcing, GBS, and we'll be covering vendor management tactics, or pricing, all kinds of really critical topics. There's a link in the chat. Thank you for posting that. That goes to the agenda and the conference registration. My email is here. If you want to talk about it, have more questions, please reach out to me. Or if you're, a friend and just want a link, please reach out as well. Would love to see more people there. We have a super exciting lineup. I am the research chair for the or the content chair for the sourcing and vendor management track, and I can't wait to have some of the conversations. It'll be heavily networking based and heavily focused on the buy side. Not a big, giant event with a huge hall of sponsors and vendors. That's not the style. It's much more about getting people like yourself talking to our analysts and talking to each other. So that's my pitch. I hope to see more people there. And I want to thank everybody for attending today. And we will wrap it up right on time. Again, you'll get the deck and the slides as well as the recording in the next couple days. So appreciate everybody taking an hour out of your day to attend. And thank you,
Thanks a
Kushbu.
lot, everyone.